Today, we're looking at the next generation of mobile connectivity. If you're in a part of the world with poor or non-existent internet, perhaps things are about to improve, and it's more than just your internet connection that might be about to change, as we'll hear. On your phone, you might be able to see just like a little 4G or a 5G symbol. 5G, that's the fifth and latest generation of mobile, and it's meant to be faster and more reliable than its older sibling, 4G, allowing better connectivity and smoother streaming. But it's almost time for another upgrade.
And 6G is definitely on the cards, but it all depends whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Let's see how the technology gets adopted.
6G is meant to be ready in just 6 years' time, and it's much bigger than just a simple upgrade. Some predict that 6G will render smartphones as we know them obsolete within a decade. It's the tech that will power telemedicine and driverless cars and take us into this space called the metaverse, where virtual meets physical. So what does it mean for business?
It is my firm belief that 6G is the crucial stepping stone how companies are able to increase their future revenues.
What difference will 6G make to our lives? And what difference will it make to industries around the world? In today's episode of Business Daily, with me, Gareth Mitchell, we'll hear how businesses from Finland to Kenya are all getting ready for this upgrade. Well, I'm standing by a busy traffic junction here on this hilltop in South London, not far from where I live. I can see down the hill towards this fantastic view of the iconic London skyline, including the dome of the famous St Paul's Cathedral. But looking in the other direction, in fact just in front of me, I can see this building. It's a tallish building and it has a steel structure on its roof. And on this structure you have these white, kind of flat, quite tall, thin panels, and each of them has this cabling coming out of them. Now, what I'm looking at is a mobile cell site. It's like a base station for the mobile network. So this is how our phones connect to the mobile network. And it's a reminder really that every phone call or text message or video or internet download on our handset, it comes via radio signals. Professor Sana Salus knows all about this. She's Chair of Communications Engineering at the University of Durham in the northeast of England. And she's been telling me that cell towers, like the one I'm looking at, are not exactly evenly distributed.
Previously, when you have new mobile radio networks coming into play, mobile network providers, because they auction the spectrum and they pay billions of pounds for it, they tend mainly to deploy it in dense urban environments and do not necessarily provide entire coverage. In fact, in the UK, there is something called the digital divide. And that was very important, in particular during COVID, because many people didn't have access to the internet and they were running small businesses. So 6G is supposed to combine both terrestrial and non-terrestrial. So there will be low Earth orbit satellites, for example, that are meant to provide global coverage. That's the principle of 6G, in addition to, of course, providing much higher data rates.
Let's just talk about what this means for businesses then. What will be the advantages to business? So, if you're driving a taxi in New York, or if you're running a fast food, street food place in Delhi, for instance, wherever you are in business, what does 6G mean for you?
It's mainly coverage. So, for example, many rural areas or many desert areas don't have coverage because mobile network operators go to dense urban environments and it takes them a very long time to provide services for these people. And there, for example, in India, there is not really much coverage. And that's why many countries now are investing in 6G.
But if you're in one of these low coverage areas, you might be thinking, well, we've missed out on 3G, we missed out on 4G, everyone now is talking about 5G. Why should 6G be any different? What is it about 6G that makes it more likely that we'll finally get coverage in our part of the world?
It's the non-terrestrial networks. So the terrestrial networks, which are basically the base stations that you can see while you're walking around or on the top of roof buildings or on special towers, these tend to be set up in areas where there are likely to be users because they want to have a large number of users in that area and to get returns on their investment, especially when the spectrum started to be auctioned. 6G is looking at using these low orbit satellites. And there's already a large number of low orbit satellites, and they are meant to provide global coverage.
And that, to me, is the first real surprise in this story. 6G is set to provide vastly better coverage, partly because it's a technology designed to work on satellites that can beam down to entire regions, and not just via terrestrial cell sites like this little tower that I'm standing in front of here in South London. Well, that is a view as I stand here in South London, literally a view, brilliant vantage point over to the London skyline from here. But now let's get a view from the continent of Africa, where Michael Kaloki, our reporter, has his perspective.
I'm out here on the streets of the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. It's a busy day out here in the capital. I see a number of people talking on their phones. Some seem to be possibly surfing the internet on their gadgets. These activities are likely taking place on 2G, 3G, 4G and 5G networks, which are currently available here in the country. So, as excitement grows in parts of the world regarding 6G, what is the situation here in Kenya and to a wider extent, the rest of the African continent? But before we get to that question, what is the situation regarding what I can perhaps coin as the new kid on the block, 5G? A question I posed to technology analyst Moses Kemibaro.
5G is very expensive to roll out, right? So that's why you'll see, for instance, in Kenya, only the biggest players are actually doing so. And I think if you map this across the continent, you will see that there are many markets where 5G has not even started. In certain cases, it's maybe a singular network that has it. And even there, if you think about the unit economics, they need to sort of launch it in the spaces and the cities and the towns where they're more or less guaranteed of coverage. So in many cases, you'll find that we've not even completely utilized 4G. So most mobile networks in Africa are still prioritizing 4G because it's still a great technology, not fully utilized as we speak. And then for 5G, I think the challenge has been, what are the use cases, right? It is faster, but what else can you do with it?
As Moses alluded to there, several mobile network operators in Africa are currently still focused on getting consumers to utilize their 4G networks. According to the telco operators body, GSMA, as of September last year, 27 mobile network operators in Africa had launched commercial 5G services. One of those operators is Airtel Kenya. Ashish Malhotra is the company's managing director.
Obviously, 5G technology has definitely revolutionized the user experience per se. That a customer uses 5G for better experience per se, better speeds, lower latency, and that is what is helping them to increase their consumption pattern. Okay, how has that impacted Kenya and rest of Africa? I would say not to a huge extent at the moment, purely because of the fact that the device cost or the entry into a 5G is starting with somewhere around $185 to $200.
Now, in its digital transformation strategy report for the years between 2020 to 2030, the African Union emphasizes the importance of affordable phones and envisions what it terms as the digital empowerment of all those on the African continent by 2030. Well, that will be just about the same time that 6G, if I can call it the next new kid on the block, is expected to be rolled out in some parts of the world. According to Mr. Malhotra, 6G will offer an increased experience for the user.
As I see it, when 6G comes, it further reduces the latency. That means, yes, we've been speaking about 5G technology giving real-time online classes, real-time virtual meetings with holograms and all those things. We're talking about real-time operations happening or being used by medical facilities per se to use 5G. And 6G will only further enhance this experience.
So are mobile network providers on the continent ready for 6G? Mr. Malhotra says that although Airtel Kenya has no current plans in place for a 6G rollout, they are keenly watching developments of the technology.
It's for us to take some time, study it properly, monitor it, how the adoption and adaptation of this new technology will happen in other parts of the world, then make an informed decision as to how do we go about rolling out 6G. So that's where we are today. We're very excited about 5G at the moment, to be very honest, Michael. And 6G is definitely on the cards, but it all depends whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Let's see how the technology gets adopted.
Well, I'm back out on the streets of Nairobi. Mobile connectivity has become an essential part of the day-to-day function of various sectors of the economy here in Kenya and other parts of the African continent. For one specific subsector, telemedicine, connectivity is crucial. I'm about to make my way to a medical clinic run by a company that offers telemedicine services here in the country.
My name is Ian Ngati Njoroge. I am the General Manager of Sasa Doctor Medical Clinic. Okay, if you're ready, Michael, let me show you how to actually see a doctor and how we actually work within Sasa Doctor.
All right, thank you, Ian. So I'm just walking into what looks like a consultation room here with Ian, and I see a gentleman seated in front of a computer. Has a white coat on. Is he a doctor, Ian?
Yes, James, our general practitioner here.
I'm just looking at James here, seated in front of an array of gadgets. He's got a desktop computer, screen in front of him, monitor. He's got a tablet in front of him, which also has a keypad. He has a laptop. And I see he's tapping onto the tablet. Does that mean that he's connecting with the patient now?
So at this point in time, what you're seeing is that he's actually seen a patient, putting in the information relevant from a doctor's standpoint, and then also writing a prescription, which we will then obviously put on the system. If this is what we get from 5G, then I can't even possibly imagine what 6G could be able to actually encompass and bring into a place like specifically, let's say, this company here. Because you see, while we operate online, we also do have physical patients, but majority of our work is done online. Apart from obviously the increase in connection to our patients, which is basically our main goal, I think 6G would actually also come in handy to be able for us as a company to get what we want efficiently from a network standpoint. Because there's a very big difference between having 3G, 4G, and now 5G. Because even the picture of the client is way clearer than it was with 3G and 4G. I can't even imagine what it would be with 6G.
So overall, just what might 6G mean for businesses in Kenya and the wider African continent? A question I posed to technology analyst Moses Kemibaro.
The reality is that the faster these connections get, the more competitive or compatible we become as a continent. When you think about the use cases around that, I mean, if you think about things like call centers, think about, people working remotely on cloud-based platforms. You remove the latency, you're working real time. You're able to work real time. That means you don't have the lags or the inefficiencies you might see today. If you're thinking about telemedicine as an application, imagine doctors in Africa being able to perform surgeries internationally, but because maybe our labor cost is cheaper, we become the more competitive option.
That report from Michael Kaloki from Kenya. Well, back here in England, I've been hearing more from University of Durham mobile technology expert Sana Salus. There's some big money being lined up for 6G, and officials are deciding how to allocate it, and they're setting the technical standards at key meetings like the International Telecommunication Union World Radio Communication Conference, or WRC.
There is a great deal of research funding going into 6G. For example, Finland has put in huge amounts of money into 6G, and they are meant to look at various aspects of 6G. Of course, companies also invested in 6G, big companies, Samsung, NTT, Docomo. Apple, for example, is also investing, Huawei. So all the industries, they are investing.
Professor Salus mentioned that Finland is piling investment into 6G. So just how much of a priority is it over there?
Yes, it's a big priority. So the Research Council of Finland has already started the basic research part of 6G funding.
That's Pekka Rantala, head of the 6G Bridge Programme at Business Finland. It's part of the Finnish government.
So that project is 250 million euros worth of research. Business Finland, so my employer, started this 6G Bridge 1.5 years ago. So we have a committed funding of 130 million euros for the 4-year runtime. But we are spending kind of a bunch of money in order to define the future.
And that brings us back to the digital divide. Pekka Rantalä reckons 6G will finally bring connectivity to those who have so far lacked it.
Currently, we have 35% of the population unconnected and 1.4 billion people which they don't have a bank account, and nearly 900 million people without official ID. If we think about the satellite communications, all these solutions will enable us to upskill us, empowerment others, and in the kind of a near future, I would say that finally we will see a situation where we have collaborative robots in a way that people are not kind of reacting based on the behavior of robots. It's the other way around. So robots will be reacting to human behavior. So that is the one thing, the kind of the people thing.
And as well as ushering in robots that better suit the way that we behave, people like Pekka Rantalä say that 6G has big potential when it comes to sustainability. 6G networks will use less energy than earlier generation mobile, and they'll enable technologies that help businesses to work greener.
For example, how to make zero defects at the factory floor, how to minimize waste, how to recycle assets or redeploy assets, and so forth. So that is kind of the second basket of the broad picture, and the third basket is it's all about productivity. So all those metaverse-like applications, novel business cases or business models, or based on data and edge computing and so forth, and based on the sensing capabilities of the network. So the network knows where am I, where I'm going to, whether I am connected or unconnected.
Back here in South London, and it is funny to think that a tech revolution is on its way, delivered through anonymous-looking mobile base stations like the one on top of the building in front of me, along, of course, with much less visible antennas on satellite. We're told that 6G will be here by 2030, and who knows whether all the claims about sustainability, robotics, telemedicine, the metaverse, and, even making phone calls will all come to pass. Of course, I hope they will. But if 6G simply means that you get a reliable, affordable internet connection wherever you are in the world, I'll happily settle for that. This edition of Business Daily was produced by Izzy Greenfield and presented by me, Gareth Mitchell.